the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. I did say I was going to bring a box of pens. I forgot, but 5 minutes ago, my lovely hairdresser, Freddie, said, I think you need this.
She didn't do it, though. Full disclosure. She didn't do it. Someone just gave it to her 10 minutes.
Was it you?
No.
Well, then I lose the bet.
Freddie, love, peace, and hair grease.
When does this end, by the way? When do you guys stop just betting against my ability to remember things?
We decided that if it ever gets to either one of us being plus or minus $1,000, it's over. Right now, I've won 3 times, he's won once, so I'm at plus 200 bucks.
This is not going to go on anymore because now I've told everyone in here if a box of pens is going under the desk. I've said it 3 days. Today I actually
I've got 100 back. What does Cardi B say? I'm living my best life.
Living your best life. There you go. See?
Oh, here we go. You need a handshake. Tap it up. That's how we
start.
Good
morning, everybody. Let's do it.
Let us start the television program. What in the world is going on in New England? First, the team doesn't win a Super Bowl. Yeah. That's crazy.
Bill Belichick and Cardi B. Shout out to the Bees. Let's do this.
And more Bees. Tom Brady battles time on Facebook, not Instagram. Now Gronk may be organizing his exit papers. There's a feud brewing in New England. According to the Boston Herald, part of the friction between the two might be Gronkowski seeing Brady's personal trainer, Alex Guerrero. Belichick, not a fan of Brady's doctor, who reportedly chastised Gronk in front of the team for being involved with the now famous TB12 method. All right, CC, motivation is key when we talk to you. You understand a little bit more than we do why things go the way they do, what the motivation is behind why a coach would do something like this in front of teammates. What do you think Bill Belichick was thinking?
Well, first of all, coaches have styles. They have themes, and then they also have their personality. Belichick was groomed under one of the great motivators and manipulators of words and trying to tap into your talent and what motivates you, Bill Parcells. That's where he learned a lot of this.
Sure.
Bill Parcells was famous for, you'd be warming up before the game, and the person either had the same number as you on the opposing team or whoever you were going against. He would be able to enhance their resume, or to be like Lawrence Taylor, he used to always say, "Oh, you're the best number 56." Because the team over there, they're number 56. Man, their general manager, I talked to him before the game. So there have been coaches. Nick Saban does the same thing at Alabama. Greg Popovich, we've read in the Kawhi and some of the other things that have coming out about Pop's style, what he did to Tim Duncan and other star players. This is typical for Belichick. The only reason why this might be a little more intriguing, because it talks about the Tom Brady and the Tom Brady 12 training method.
But, CC, did some of those other coaches do it as a form of motivation? Was this, in your opinion, do you think he did this to try to motivate Gronk? Because it seemed like it might have been for the opposite reason. Well,
Belichick and coaches like that, yes, part of their job is motivation, but also part of it is to check the organization. It's also to let the other guys know no one else here is above being criticized. Tom Brady is criticized. I tell you guys all the time, Bill Belichick, when he starts, typically he starts the session after the game with the bad plays of the game. And he will start at the top with Tom Brady and mistakes that he's made. He's used this as a training tool in New England for a long time. So it's not surprising that he got on someone like Gronk. This is how he does things. Nick Saban does things the very similar way. Greg Popovich, we've read about him doing things the same way. So I'm not surprised at all. This is how Bill does things, and he's been very successful at it. Now, we can't act as if Bill didn't have a problem with Guerrero being at the training facility.
Right.
Because they granted him clearance, and then eventually they revoked that clearance. So I'm not surprised at all. If he had a problem with the trainer, that he would send a message through either Tom or through Gronk to the rest of the guys. If he didn't want the guys training with him, if he thought there was a conflict as far as messaging between the training staff and what Guerrero was doing, yes, he was trying to clear that up. And the best way to do it is to be able to use strong words against one of your star players in front of his peers.
Listen, the examples you're using about other coaches trying to motivate guys, and Belichick has a lot of that in him as well, I almost put that in a slightly different category to this, because what this includes that those examples to me don't necessarily is the element of control. And I think what we saw last year was, for the first time since really the Patriots won that Super Bowl in 2001, Bill Belichick lost at least a small piece of his control. And for a guy that I don't think he would look at this as an insult, a guy that is all but a self-proclaimed control freak, a guy that Coach Mangini, who's going to be with us later, has talked about, he sits in on, Coach Belichick does, the interviews of the lowest level assistants that he wants to, year before last, when the defense was struggling, what were we told happened? Coach Belichick came in and said, all right, guess what? I understand, Patricia, you're the D coordinator, but I'm now going to focus on this unit intently because I'm going to get it.
You're not meaning it as a negative. Okay.
Not at all. But I'm saying a guy who
Yes.
likes to have an intense amount of control over every situation.
Yeah, most successful people I know, they're control freaks.
Sure. I'm not.
Especially coaches.
Agreed, which is why with Guerrero in particular, and you have to keep in mind who Guerrero was brought into the fold by, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, who last year, it would appear, for the first time in Belichick's tenure there, has almost superseded Belichick in the control hierarchy. To me, this is an example of a guy wrestling some of that control back. He can't tell Tom Brady not to train with Alex Guerrero. But guess what? Who's the next biggest name in that locker room that he can still, for the other 51 guys in the locker room, remind them who is ultimately in control? Maybe this guy gets to do his own thing, but you guys can't. Even Rob Gronkowski can't. That, to me, is the differentiating factor, because I don't think Alex Guerrero, even if I don't agree with all his methods, and I think some of the things he's tried to sell in the past are sketchy at best, I don't think he's a bad trainer. I don't think he's making these guys more likely to get hurt, or that all of a sudden the Patriots are going to be at a competitive disadvantage because they have guys training with Alex Guerrero. I don't know if he's better or worse than the training staff. Probably about equal. To me, it's about we're running things my way here and reminding the team of that.
Well, a couple of the players that have trained with Guerrero have not stayed nearly as healthy as Tom Brady have. They have had injuries, including Rob Gronkowski. But do you think that the issue is with Guerrero, or the issue then is with Brady? What issue would Belichick have with a trainer who wants to come in and help the players, unless it was what Nick said, just a way of sort of securing control over
I think the problem has to be with the training and the communication between the training staff, what they're currently doing, how players would be treated, and ultimately, at the end of the day, who has the final say?
Right.
You know, is it the team doctor, or is it this trainer who's Tom Brady's trainer? Now, the team, do they set themselves up to be liable if they allow the players to go to someone who's not certified by the NFL? So you get into a lot of different things as far as conducting business. One thing with a coach, ultimately, it's always about getting a person to do something that they couldn't do on their own. So you might call it motivation. You might call it something else. You might call it control. But that's what a coach's job is to do, to get you to a place where you can't get on your own. If you can get there on your own, you wouldn't need the coach. Belichick is one of the best at it. So this method, I'm not surprised by it at all. And it's very, very similar to other stories that I've heard from New England.
Let me ask you this, even if we can take a bigger picture look. As a pro athlete, as an elite level athlete as Gronk is, how important is your own training staff? You've talked about how much money you spent. That some of your trainers now are the guys Antonio Brown employs, right? How important is the staff of people that work on your body and that you get either medical or training advice from outside of the team?
It's important, but you have to realize your contract is with the team, though. So what you're doing is the time you're not with the team, you either have discovered a training method that has been successful with you, and you're trying to keep that going. So if we're in season 7 months, those other 5 months, I'm trying to be responsible for my body. They're more important in the off season than they are during the season. Now, during the season, you're just having maintenance to try to keep the body fresh so you don't get hurt. So Guerrero and Tom, they have a great program that they use during the season. Antonio Brown, the people that I use, they have a great training measurement that they use outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers or the organizations that they are a part of. That's something that we understand. They're not employees of the team. So they have to be separate.
Right.
You have to employ them on your own.
And that never, for you in your career, that never got sideways with the team.
It didn't get sideways like New England, but you're going to have problems because you have difference in philosophy.
But you didn't bring them into the facility to train right there in the locker room.
Yeah, I tried to, but Denny Green let me know where it stops. And typically being employed by the team and the overall liability that the team is exposing itself, that's the game changer.
Right.
Like, we don't mind you getting treated by this guy.
Yeah.
But when we can be liable for him treating you and other players, that's right there where we have to draw the line.
Nick, it sounds like you're in the hunt for a trainer. Are you looking for a training staff to just work with you in the offseason?
I've been working on a regiment with the best athlete on the staff, Cris Carter. And so he's been talking to me about some Peloton classes, a little free weight exercise. We've been talking about it. We're going to implement it in 2022.
There are very few things that I can say definitively that I am better at you at.
Go ahead. Let's just say two, though. We can't. We're not going to say it, but mention two of them.
Nick, why don't you tell everybody what you told me yesterday, that you are the...
Coming up, is a LeBron Heat reunion possible? That's next on First Things First.
I don't...
About a business decision, Beasley runs out of the frame. Oh, no,
I don't want no piece of that.
I mean, he's not even on camera on the third angle.
Look at that. Would you want to go up against that coming at you?
Beasley runs off screen.
Yeah, I was only disappointed because I thought LeBron was going to dunk on someone last night. We also happened to be at the Garden. I thought that was going to be it. But Beasley...
You have to be there to dunk on you.
Oh, my God.
He's running before the crime is committed.
Yes.
Smart man. Moving on to LeBron's brief swoon with the Miami Heat. Quick recap. LeBron went to Miami for 4 seasons, won 2 titles before returning to Cleveland in the summer of 2014. In a new book just released, Miami Heat GM Pat Riley said at the time he wished LeBron had stayed, that the team could have won 5 or 6 titles with him, but that he believes LeBron, quote, did the right thing in the end, returning to Cleveland. Reportedly, LeBron and Riley haven't spoken since that summer. So, Nick, I ask you, what was your reaction to Riley's comments? Did they surprise you at all?
I mean, they were slightly surprising in the moment you read them because this was a bad breakup. Pat Riley, if we remember, pre-breakup, threatened, and threatened is the absolute wrong word, pardon me, questioned LeBron's competition integrity by saying, do you leave when it gets hard? Or do you stay? Do you stay and fight? He gave a famous press conference right after they lost to the Spurs in 5 games. A lot of people thought he was issuing a challenge to LeBron. Pat Riley then did not like the way LeBron went about his decision, and that relationship severed. And so when I first read it, yeah, I was surprised. And then I looked at Miami Heat's salary cap situation. I looked at this summer's free agents. I looked at the fact that Pat Riley's 73 years old, and I was like, oh, okay. So that's what this is. This is, to mix sports metaphors, a Hail Mary attempt at, hey, LeBron, like this summer when you're a free agent, you know, we'd love to have you back. Like, we'd welcome you here with open arms. Your buddy D-Wade, you saw how we brought him back? You saw how we mended that fence? Because D-Wade and Riley broke up on bad terms. D-Wade thought he was owed money, didn't get the money. They had a bad breakup. No, we smoothed that over. And we can clear up some of these cap situations. Like, so to me, this was the Miami Heat, led by the face of the Miami Heat at this point, Pat Riley, trying to get in the discussion. Hey, you know your wife? She did sure seem to love South Florida. Your kids, you still own a home down here. Eastern Conference. There's a lot of things we can do here. That was my immediate reaction to this.
And there's probably a better chance because you have to consider this. If LeBron's going to stay in the East, which teams would he go to? And it's just no different than New York. There's a couple billboards, trying to woo the king to come to New York. And if he's trying to stay in the East, we know he's not going to Boston. We know he's not going to New York. Why wouldn't you consider Miami? We know he's not going to Toronto. Why wouldn't you consider Miami with Pat Riley and the strong ownership that they, and knowing that they had a previous relationship? But to me, there was never a chance of LeBron potentially going back to Miami from the beginning. Because when LeBron originally made the decision to go from Cleveland to Miami, there was a lot of things that maybe Pat Riley discussed in the initial meeting, but once LeBron signed, that they didn't acquiesce on. As far as LeBron and his family and the type of access that they had to the locker room, courtside seats, all those things.
Access to the plane.
They became a problem immediately. So, yes, let's not forget, before LeBron went there, how many championships did the Heat have?
One.
How many finals appearances did they have?
One.
Okay, so he took them to 4 finals. They had only been to 1 final. They had 1 championship, and he gave them 2 championships.
Yeah.
But people talk about the end, but things started happening at the beginning of that relationship that LeBron did not forget. And also, let's not forget who he was going to play with. Dwayne Wade, at that point, was already missing 25, 30 games with his knees. Chris Bosh, I don't think was the best fit going forward with LeBron and his skill set. I'm sure there was question in LeBron's camp how long we can be good, just Chris Bosh and Dwayne kind of being the third guy. So there were a number of other things that happened in this relationship before Nick said that they got their divorce.
Timing on this to write that whole book and have the excerpts come out right before the draft, and all of it seems to all match together perfectly. The one thing that, and I've asked you guys multiple times, what do you think is the most important deciding factor with LeBron when it comes to moving? And it's always been, I want to win titles. Like I'm you know,
it's
in
not,
year whatever 27 of my NBA career, if I have like a handful of years left, it's to go win titles. So when you say Hail Mary, this is like the quintessential Hail Mary.
Well,
but besides Popovich, wait a second, who's got a stronger resume than Pat Riley?
As far as building teams?
Yeah, building.
Do you have the time? Does he want to go somewhere where you're going to take the time to build a team, or does he want to go somewhere where the Sixers already have a foundation in place?
Well, what if they get Kawhi? If they get Kawhi and LeBron in Miami?
Right.
There's a lot of what ifs. Sure.
And what we learned this year, as the Cavs just won their 50th game, is you put LeBron on any team in the Eastern Conference, they win 50 games. That's what we learned this year, given who's been on the Cavs this year. And I know we'll talk more about that later in the show. So, I think he feels like we can compete anywhere, at least in theory. Now, obviously, Houston, Philly, San Antonio, if they get it patched up with Kawhi, are all much better options to win now. But, Jenna, while the most important thing might be winning, that doesn't mean it is more important than all the other factors combined, right? Okay. Winning might be 30% of the decision. 20% of the decision might be longevity of career, 10% coaching staff, another 15%. Is my wife going to be happy? Are my kids going to be happy? Like, that's where Los Angeles has going for them.
And Miami could check off a lot of those boxes.
Absolutely right. And I also think the overall thing when we say winning, what I think we're really talking about is legacy. And that's why, there is an interesting basketball fit to be made for Milwaukee. But there's something odd about the LeBron James story having its 4th act be in Milwaukee that doesn't seem to fit with, the legacy part of it. Miami does allow that box to be checked. Cleveland, Miami, Cleveland, Miami. I don't think this is likely, but I will say this, Cece. Other than Philly and Cleveland, I guess now that Pat Riley's open to it, Miami would be 3rd place in the East. Of the teams in the East, I can't think of another one that's a real possibility other than Philly and Cleveland. So I get what Pat Riley's doing.
One maybe
here.
You might not want to admit, Boston.
Well, yeah, sure. If they could make the cap space work, absolutely, Boston. I think they'd have to trade Kyrie, but I don't think that would work. I don't think that would work for the Celtic fans.
That would be a great end to that narrative. Coming up, can Eli and Odell make it work for years to come? We'll talk a little Giants on the other side. Next on First Things First. Finally, let's talk some New York Giants. The team was happy Odell showed up to their off-season workouts yesterday. Odell's quarterback, Eli Manning, says he wasn't that surprised, because it's his job and he's getting paid, and that's sort of how a job works. Manning went on to add, quote, "I look forward to playing with him this year and for years to come." Chris Carter, do you expect these two to play together for years to come?
Yes, I'm one of the few people that thought when the Giants said they wanted Eli as their quarterback that they were being truthful. Eli has brought them 2 Super Bowls. I know the Giants are very, very fond of that, fond of his leadership, how he's handled the New York media. After they made him that first pick in the draft, yes, I think they'll re-sign Odell. So, yes, I look for them for play for a couple more years together. How long that's going to be, I believe that's irrelevant. But Eli has gotten the type of messaging from the Giants that has told him he's going to be there. There's no way on the first day of OTAs that he, as a veteran quarterback, would say that unless the Giants gave him assurances. And also they've assured him, man, we're trying to sign Odell. We're not trying to trade him. That's why Eli. So you marry those two comments together, you can find out what the Giants have told Eli about himself and his career and what they have said about Odell and moving forward.
So do these comments change, not even necessarily change, but affect your opinion on what you believe the Giants are going to do with that number 2 pick of the draft?
No, they don't have anything to do with each other.
Well, when you say Eli, that Eli wouldn't say this if he's not confident he's going to be there long term. He wouldn't say these things. Like that's why I'm asking. I just want to understand.
Well, no, they still might draft a quarterback.
Got it. Okay, so that's what I was. So when you say you're talking about the long term really being, as you mentioned, you didn't care about the length of it this year.
I mean, Eli's 37.
Right.
What's long term for 37? 2 years?
2 years is probably a long term, and that's the point.
And that's 2 years is a long time. Even if the quarterback was hot, if the guy was like Tom Brady. At 37, Nick, we had him. Hey, man, it's time to look for a replacement. Drew Brees. Because of the way he played last year, we'd be saying the same thing about him. Eli is coming into 37 not playing as well as these guys. So long term, if Eli don't play well during the season, he could get benched too.
That's the key point. That is, I learned last year kind of the hard way that maybe using the historical parameters as far as quarterbacks and their age and what their success could be, that in 2017 and 2018 you can throw those out. Like we've seen in the last 3 seasons the best quarterback rating ever for a guy 38 years old or older set 4 different times in the last 3 seasons. 3 times by Tom Brady, once by Drew Brees. It'll probably be broken again by both of them this year. So for players that are still playing at a super high level, the age doesn't seem that relevant. But the age does seem relevant for Eli because his quarterback trajectory has at least followed more of what you would consider a conventional or predictable, normal. Yes. Whereas, okay, so his best time was his early 30s. He had a bit of a resurgence a couple years ago with Odell. And then last year and really the year before, like you saw it tracking downwards. Now, I don't think he'll be as bad this year as he was last year because the Giants won't be as injured. They'll be better at the offensive line. Odell will be there for more than a couple of games. But of course, like, there is no real long term for Eli Manning when you're 37 years old and you're coming off a season where your passer rating wasn't in the top 20 in the NFL. Like, the long term for Eli is this season and maybe the next season. Realistically,
you pair these two together. What can they do based on what you saw last year? How big of a turnaround pairing these two could you see for the Giants?
They have to do some things offensively. They have to give Eli the protection that he needs. They have to have some type of running game. Nate Solder is coming over from New England as the left tackle. That should help him in pass protecting. But the Giants' inability to be physical from a running standpoint, that hurts the passing game. Brandon Marshall, he's had a good offseason. He's trying to come back from his worst season as a pro. So they can be one of the most prolific offenses as far as throwing the football. But throwing the football is not going to get them success in the NFL. They have to have some balance. And the Giants, the only time that they've won is when their defense has been outstanding.
Right.
So it's not only on Eli's shoulder, Odell's shoulder. It's that organization, that defense, and collectively what they're trying to do.
And the defense is where they've spent the lion's share of their money. Like, Eli's got a reasonable contract. Odell hasn't gotten paid yet. They don't, prior to signing Nate Solder, like, their offensive line wasn't super high paid. Like, their money was spent on those star defensive acquisitions in free agency the season before last and in drafting a guy like Landon Collins. Like, the talent and dollars would say the defense should be one of the 10 best in the league, which was their method in 2016. The offense wasn't elite in 2016. It was good enough to go along with a really good defense.
All right, if it feels like it's been a while since we talked about Andrew Luck playing football, it's because it's been a while since we talked about Andrew Luck playing football. He hasn't played a game since 2016, out with that shoulder injury, and it turns out he may be further away from returning to the field than we thought. Luck spoke about his rehab process. Take a listen to this.
I'm not a perfect feeling athlete right now, by any means. So there's still a focus on me to make sure that I can feel really, really good and then be unbreakable. I don't want to put myself in a situation where this happens again and I have to go through the same thing again and again. No, I've not picked up the Duke and started throwing it yet, and I don't want to skip steps. I'm trusting the process that I'm in right now very, very much. I'm trusting myself in this process, and when the time is right, I'll pick it up.
So, CC, Andrew Luck had said earlier that in prior rehab stints, he has skipped a couple steps. He was anxious to get back on the field. He wants to play. Obviously, you know he wants to play. This time, he's very set in his ways that he is going to make every effort to really go step by step to make this process work for him. How big of a deal is it, though, that he hasn't even picked up an official NFL football yet?
It's not a big deal. I mean, he tore his labrum, and this is an injury that goes back to not him missing the season last year, not him getting injured in 2016. This is the injury from 2015. And in the interview and other publications, it's been clear that something went wrong with the procedure and or the rehab. Now, Andrew Luck took some of the responsibility. He said that he's an impatient person, and then, bless you, and then he also said that he doesn't want to take any missteps, which he letting us know he made mistakes before.
Yeah.
He thought his body felt. Now, Andrew Luck is a big, strong guy. Now, we might hear his voice. People who don't know him and see him up close, like he is built like you want an NFL quarterback to be built. So he thought it was about a physicality thing, and it's not. It's a lot of small. When you tear your labrum, there's a lot of small muscles that you have to strengthen to try to regain his throwing motion. And that's just normal part of the physical therapy process. Eventually, he'll pick up the football. But I'm glad that he understands what the process is now, how the process went wrong the last time, and trying to correct it. So I think at this point in April, it's not a big deal. He's coming back from a significant injury.
He's coming back from basically, you remove like spinal cord, back, neck type of things, like as significant of an injury as a quarterback can suffer. Like obviously labrum in your throwing arm, it's a huge deal. But I want the audience to better understand what the process is, because I will admit, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I was super confused. Because I had read a few weeks ago Andrew Luck is throwing a ball that's heavier than a football, and then I read today he's not yet throwing a regular football. And I walked into Chris's office this morning, I said, explain this to me. What is the process where he would be throwing something heavier than a football, right, but not yet able to throw a regular football? So explain the process out, because I don't think it makes sense to people who haven't been through it.
Well, I think, Jenna, you'll understand this. There's a thing called functional strength, and what they're trying to do, the normal things that he would do in throwing the football, all those little muscles, he's trying to strengthen them, right, by throwing a weighted ball, the same shape, the same size, so when he grips it with his hand, it feels the same way. So you're recruiting the same muscles that you would to throw the football. It's not important to throw the football right now. It's important that his shoulder is strong and his shoulder can support the throwing motion, the repetitive motion, over and over and over again. It's just like any other rehab that you're going to go through. You typically have some type of resistance, some type of assistance, and some type of weighted situation to help you, assist you in that rehab.
And the analogy you used that I thought was really helpful for me to visualize it is, if a basketball player hurts his shoulder, he might take a ball heavier than a basketball and work essentially on shots right at the rim.
Yes.
Just to get
right up under
down.
the rim.
And you might be able to do that with a heavier ball well before they would have you work on your three-pointers.
Yes.
So when you're saying he's throwing the weighted ball, he's really throwing it, but just
very short.
Not for velocity, just to make sure he's got the movement.
Right.
Yes. The movement and the motion.
Right.
Go ahead, sorry.
How confident are we with the process? Because you seem more confident than I guess Nick and I was when we were reading about this, that he will be ready for week 1, that he will get back to the form, that we will be able to put up numbers that he once did.
There's nothing I can tell you that gives me the confidence besides just knowing Andrew Luck. Knowing that people have come back from a torn labrum, realizing that also they said something went wrong. So obviously there's something went wrong. There's something that could have been corrected. So it's just more of a belief that I have in Andrew Luck, and I believe that his destiny ends up with him being one of the greatest quarterbacks ever compared to him being one of the biggest disappointments that we've seen ever.
And I want to, just as a football fan, man, I hope he gets back to health, because he was unfairly maligned by dopes such as myself for 2 years, who didn't know how significant this injury was, who I held his draft projection against him, saying, this guy was supposed to be the best quarterback prospect in 30 years. He's had one really good season, and that's it. Like, he's not the guy we were told he was going to be. He was playing through a significant injury. I didn't know it at the time. I wasn't the only one, but I will own that. Like, I would like to see what a fully healthy Andrew Luck, as a veteran in this league, hopefully with a legitimate supporting cast, can actually look like. Because the guys who study guys coming out of college say he was going to be one of the great players in this league.
Yeah, let's not forget his first 3 years, they won 11 games. 11, 11, and 11. All right, he was off to a great start. No, look right in the camera, Nick. Say I'm a dope.
Well, I just said it.
No.
Let
Let it marinate.
Here, you guys.
But you were criticizing him for years, so let's get like 2 or 3 minutes of that. Look right in there. I'm a dope.
Could the
Andrew
Thunder
Luck,
be
I
poised
apologize.
for a
There you
deep
go.
playoff run? Next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. Chris Mannix is with us. Chris, this morning,
What up, man?
Nick comes into the morning meeting, and there's always one thing he likes to brag about, if it was a workout or a big meal or something. And this morning, it was you. He got to be on your podcast yesterday.
Yes.
It was the highlight of his day. He beamed from ear to ear talking about it.
We just can't spend enough time together.
Is that what it
It's
is?
one of those things.
It was a ton of fun. It'll post right after the show.
Yes.
People should
Good.
check it out.
Excellent.
It may have already posted, but I'm telling people it posts after the show.
Check
Just
after.
to make sure we get the
1:30
business.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Chris, you know, when the Oklahoma City Thunder team was first put together this offseason, expectations were high. How could they not win with Russ and PG3 and Melo? And then came a long, head-scratching season of moderate disappointment. And then last night, they clinched a playoff spot with a win over the Heat. In fact, a win on Wednesday, and they clinched a top 6 seed in the West. So which Thunder team is heading to the playoffs? No one really knows. Chris Mannix, how dangerous are the Thunder to those 2 big teams in the West, the Rockets and the Warriors?
I tell you what, I was rooting pretty hard for the Heat last night because nobody wanted the 2-7 matchup with Oklahoma City and Golden State more than I did, because that would have been the most intriguing and fascinating first-round matchup. That being said, Oklahoma City is by far and away the most dangerous team in the bottom half of the playoff bracket. I mean, to some degree, they've underachieved offensively this year. If they can get it together, they're as dangerous as they get. They're far more dangerous, though, in my opinion, to Golden State than they are to Houston, just because of the natural hatred factor that exists between Oklahoma City and the Golden State Warriors, plus the matchups there. You know,
Yes.
Steph Curry, what does he look like when he comes back? Is it going to be Quinn Cook versus Russell Westbrook? Paul George, even though they missed something with Andre Roberson out of the lineup, he can defend Kevin Durant at a decent level. If you look at the numbers for Oklahoma City, they're pretty good against Golden State. That's the matchup I'd love to see in the second round, and the most dangerous one for Golden State.
And just to clarify, in case people don't understand why Mannix was rooting for Miami last night, if Miami had beaten Oklahoma City last night, then we would be in line for that 2-7 matchup. Now, the only way we get OKC Golden State in the first round is if OKC loses to a terrible Memphis
we're just assuming
team
that the Grizzlies
and some other help. So that's why that game was relevant to you.
Yeah, one thing we have to be careful about, we know about OKC, but the difference between 3 and 8 in the Western Conference is 2 games. So you talk about, man, the 4 to 5, with these matchups, the second round. Yes, we would have loved to see OKC in that 7 spot, because what it brings to the playoffs. The reason why we think this year for Golden State was going to be their toughest year, toughest run to a championship, was because how in the 3 previous ones, they blew through the playoffs. Nick, it's well documented what their playoff record was, but if you could match them up with someone with the hatred, just the personal vendetta, KD, Russ, OKC, the crowd, the home court advantage that they have at OKC, because I believe that plays a big difference. The wear and tear, not only physically, but mentally, that it would have on Golden State. Like, I believe also that Golden State, it would get their full attention. If they get someone else in the first round, now we know they've been sleepwalking the last 10 or 15 games, but Russ and OKC, it would get the champs undivided attention, realizing that this is the first time that we could actually lose in the first round.
And so the point is, they are likely now probably going to get the Spurs or the Pelicans or Golden State in the first round. There's some other machinations, those most likely outcomes. Right. And I think most people believe, even without Steph, Golden State with home court advantage, a rested Golden State would be heavy favorites against the Spurs or the Pelicans, especially with San Antonio now that we know Kawhi isn't coming back. But this is the most important playoff series this is the most important playoff series the Oklahoma City Thunder have played, I would argue, certainly since the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors, but you could make something of an argument since the NBA Finals against the Heat, because what it means, whomever they're playing, for the trajectory of this franchise, if they lose in the first round. They've got 47 wins. They got 47 wins last year. They got to the first round last year. If they have the same result this year as last year, and then all of a sudden players around the league, most notably Paul George, but all the other pending free agents in upcoming seasons, Klay Thompson a year from now, Boogie Cousins this offseason, whomever it is, say, well, maybe the method of Russ being the best player on a team just isn't going to be a successful one. That it's got a very high floor, but also a low ceiling. And what that means for, like, Russ is relevant and will always be relevant in this league as an individual star. But will the Thunder continue to be relevant past this year? We felt like they got the most out of their season last year with Russ and the assorted parts with 47 wins. If they get 48, when you bring in an all-NBA guy in Paul George, forget the mellow part of it. Like, it would be wildly disappointing, and that's potentially what they're staring at.
Yeah, and if you're Russell Westbrook, to put it even further under the microscope, this is your career, basically, this postseason. Because if they flame out in the first round, chances are, and look, nothing is set in stone, but chances are that Paul George walks at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And then what do you have? Remember, it's not like Oklahoma City can take the money that Paul George leaves and go sign DeMarcus Cousins or whoever it is. Yes. They're kind of locked in with some of their salaries there.
Yeah, it's not equal dollars.
It's not, but if you're Russell Westbrook, this postseason could mean the difference between adding on to a team that's a championship contender and competing for titles for the next 5 years for the prime of your career, or competing for a playoff spot for the rest of your career. You can't understate the importance, the magnitude of this postseason on the future of Russell Westbrook as an individual.
Especially when you consider he's locked in there.
He's locked in. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's not going to go. And look, one thing I can say this about, Russell Westbrook and Oklahoma City have a great relationship. So if it's not going well in year 2 and year 3, and Russell's like, maybe trading me is the best for both things, I can see them moving Russell Westbrook at some point. But for him in Oklahoma City, this is it. This right here, this postseason is going to determine how his career plays out in OKC.
You keep talking about how hot this team could be, how good this team can be, how dangerous this team is among the bottom 3 or 4 in the West. What do you consider a success for them yet? With who they added this offseason, with the way they played all offseason, it can't just be a first-round win. I mean, how far do they have to go for you to say, okay, they did right by all the pieces they put in here?
I mean, look, I think it's got to be at least second round, and the second round's got to be a dogfight. You've got to at least put up a fight against Golden State or Houston to make people believe that team, with maybe a tweak or two here, bring Roberson back next year, something makes them make that jump into that conference finals territory. I don't know if they necessarily have to beat Houston or Golden State,
but take it far.
Fight with them, yes.
Something that would supersede that, even a failure in the playoffs. If they were able to convince Paul George to come back, the rest of that wouldn't even matter.
I think, Chris, Paul George wants to come back. I do believe he wants to. You got to give him a reason. I believe he wants to.
Right, but I just believe their ability to retain him. I believe that would send a good message. And what about potentially getting Boogie Cousins to come there? Because I got to get off of Melo, man.
Well, you got to get off of Melo, but because they've locked up Steven Adams, it's such a, you would have to, the Boogie thing probably doesn't work because you've locked up Steven Adams. The Paul George thing, though, if you have Russ and Paul George, you will be able to find someone else that wants to come there, even if Boogie isn't the actual name, the guy we're talking about there. Something I didn't know about Paul George is Paul George is like a guy that's into going fishing, not a big city guy necessarily, not a nightlife guy.
Yeah.
If
you follow him when he was with the Pacers, a lot of his Instagram, a lot of his pictures were contrary to what people say about him and some of the other stuff that he was involved in. In his downtime, he does like to fish. That's why people were a little surprised that he left Indiana in the way that he left.
He told me he found a golf course in Oklahoma City and he fishes with like a bunch of old white guys, like all the time on that.
That's his life.
That's just what he does. That's why
not a lot of black guys at the country club.
Probably not like this. But like that's what I'm saying. Like, it's one thing for Paul George to say, I want to leave Indiana to go to the Lakers when you're playing for a go-nowhere Indiana team with no future. If Oklahoma City shows a future, that's what I'm talking about with that second-round dogfight. If they show they can compete for championships over the next 5 years, I think that could be just the push that Paul George needs to stay in Oklahoma City. But they get beat in the first round badly. I just don't see it.
Look, best largemouth bass fishing is always on a golf course.
Really?
I know that because I have rod and reels on my golf course in Florida.
He sets up a chair. He just sets up a chair there.
Absolutely.
And fishes. That's what he does.
Yes.
Best largemouth bass is
on a golf course because the fertilizer that comes out of the grass gets into the water and not a lot of people there fishing.
Okay.
Yeah, man. I
Good
know
to
some
know.
things. I've
All
been
right.
on this earth a while.
Learn something new.
I just want to say largemouth bass, so I could say it one time on the show
Do
in the
that.
course of my entire
Did it.
contract.
Now, Jenna somehow
Largemouth
worked
bass.
that into
Oh, no doubt.
being inappropriate or something like
Well,
that.
welcome, largemouth bass.
Coming
Welcome
up,
to
is
my
Pat
life.
Riley
We're back
recruiting
after
LeBron to
this.
Miami.
LeBron James, quick history lesson here. He was in Cleveland, then he went to Miami, then he went back to Cleveland. He left the Heat, not such great terms with Pat Riley, and while Riley was real mad at the time, he is now saying in a new book, LeBron made the right call going back to the Cavs. Chris Maddox, what's your reaction to Riley's recent
Look,
comments?
there's always a method to Pat Riley's madness. Like, he's not.
It's working an angle, boys.
He's just not. He just doesn't say stuff unless there's a reason behind it. He's not going to praise LeBron James unless maybe he needs something
Out of
from
LeBron James.
And look, I think it's a pipe dream to imagine LeBron James going back to Miami. I mean,
Yes.
he went to Miami the first time after a lot of consideration when in their prime Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade were there. Now, because Miami is kind of landlocked with some bad salaries. Some of them are
Yes.
tradable, but some salaries, like the Tyler Johnson salary, really, really bad. I think, and Dwayne Wade, obviously, the back end of his career. LeBron, wherever he goes, is going to go somewhere where he can get one or two other big-time stars with him. And look, they're always big game hunting in Miami. They chased Gordon Hayward, had a shot at Gordon Hayward. They try to convince some guys to, not sign long-term deals at place so they can recruit them the next year. So I get what he's trying to do, but I just don't think it's possible. I think it's pie in the sky for Miami.
The only thing, if you're a Miami Heat fan listening to this, by the way, I totally agree. That's what Riley's doing. Riley is trying to at least open the window, open the door slightly ajar to LeBron having his decision this offseason be to go to Miami. The only reason that I would think it's even somewhat plausible is I do remember the first time LeBron went to Miami. At this point in that year, they were not on the radar of it. Like, there were a few people saying, I think Miami, and those people were shouted down mostly. It was about Chicago. It was about the Knicks. It was about potentially a pipe dream of the Lakers. And then Miami started gaining momentum later in the process once people were like, well, did these guys talk about this together at the Olympics, by the way, years before? I don't think it's realistic. But what I do think, when you say there's a method to Pat Riley's, whatever he's doing, even if he doesn't land LeBron, this makes sense. Just like even if D-Wade didn't help them this year, and he has, by the way, bringing him back into the fold makes sense. Because one of the things the Heat have been known for since Pat Riley's been there has been the Heat lifer, the Heat culture, that Alonzo Mourning has a job here. We treat our stars right. And by the way, Alonzo and them had a bad breakup, but then they brought him back into the fold. And you need to mend this fence with LeBron. Now, I don't know if LeBron's interested in it being mended, but you need to at least offer that olive branch, even if you don't get LeBron, because it helps you get the next time a superstar comes around.
Tell me, would it be more of a stretch? LeBron, when he was in Miami, deciding to partner back with Dan Gilbert. Now, because that would people like, that's not going to happen. Compared to LeBron partnering back up with Pat Riley. Which one of those would you think was a more far-fetched?
I would have thought the Dan Gilbert thing was far more far-fetched. The distinction I would draw is Miami doesn't have a year for Kyrie Irving and the #1 pick of the draft that they can then flip
But
for
the
a
relationship
star.
with Riley, if people were concentrating on that compared to Dan Gilbert.
The relationship with Riley was never really fractured. It was almost like, LeBron left him, and maybe there was kind of do I really want to reapproach him? Do I want to try to mend this fence? Does it need to be mending? Remember, when LeBron left, Riley kind of held a press conference and was like, whatever. He's making he's got to do what he's got to do, but we're going to still try to win down here. It wasn't Dan Gilbert went out and just napalmed him and just absolutely Comic Sans MS'd him in that letter. Just a different dynamic altogether.
Besides this Brook excerpt that's coming out, what would Miami have to do to realistically or legitimately have a shot at getting LeBron
You'd have to
James?
bring somebody else to the table with them. You'd have to, be able to recruit one other big-name guy, whether it is, maybe you say to LeBron, we can flip Hassan Whiteside for DeMarcus Cousins. We can bring in a player like that. We can maneuver. You have to have a concrete plan in place. And maybe they can have one. Maybe they can do that. But I still think it's far more likely that a Philadelphia, a Houston, an L.A. comes to the table with a better type of deal. Plus,
already have those
who already
players.
have those pieces in place. But I don't know that LeBron wants that back in Miami. He's always said great experience.
Called it
Accomplished a lot.
college.
Yeah,
He said it was
accomplished-
college for me. I
But
matured. I
Cleveland-
learned
Yeah,
about
and once you
there
go
was
into the
the-
pros, you don't want to go back to college.
Yeah, Cleveland, there was the lure. There was the siren song of going back and playing in Akron and being a hero amongst these guys. I don't think there's that type of lure, especially with Dwayne Wade in the back end of his career.
Listen, there are 3 places that are practical, logical. They've been on the radar, at least 2 of them all year, and the third one as of late, that make total sense for LeBron for, by the way, somewhat very different reasons. There's Los Angeles. The biggest thing they have going for that, because we don't know who he could bring with him to Los Angeles. We think Paul George. We think maybe they could also work some trade for Kawhi and have a super team there. But Los Angeles, it is about setting up his post-basketball life. Right? That's what the biggest lure Los Angeles has is that.
It's also still championships. LeBron is not going anywhere he cannot win championships.
Oh, the 3 places I'm going to say I think all have the championship component. I'm saying the championship component baked in, and then what's the other reason? LA, it would be more off the court stuff to me. To me, Houston would be about finally being able to play with Chris Paul and being able to win immediately. Philadelphia would be, again, the championships, but also extending your career as long as is possible. Philadelphia is the best option to have as you've talked about, an 18-year prime if you're LeBron James. Like, Miami doesn't check any of those boxes. Like, that's what they have working against them. There's no like, oh yeah, but they can do this, and they have the smallest championship possibilities of any of those 3 teams by far.
There's 2 things you can be sure of about LeBron's next decision here. One is when he makes it, we're going to learn after the fact that there probably was kind of a 2010 component to it, right? That there was something going on behind the scenes over the course of this year that brought everything together to put him in the spot he decides to go to. The other part about that works against Miami is that he doesn't really have any control down there and never did. He goes to Miami and he complains about Eric Spoelstra and is told to shove off. He wants to bring his guys into the fold. He's told to go away. You get passes for pregame and that's pretty much it.
Yes.
You are a basketball player in
no
Miami.
courtside
and whether it's
seats, you can pay for 'em.
in LA with Jeannie Buss down there, you can dictate some stuff. Cleveland, we know he has the run of the place. You don't have that down in Miami, and I'm not sure that he wants a situation like that.
It's a good point we don't always think about. Cris Mannix, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Appreciate you.
Good time. Coming up, Hall of Famer Jerome Bettis joins the show.
Oh, no problem. Let's take the
Next
kids to
on
school
First
on the bus,
Things
man.
First.
Let's do this. We got a Hall of Famer in the house.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.